My name is Nathan Stein. I'm the Global Ops Officer for Diversity and Inclusion here at Morgan Stanley. And on behalf of Susan Reed, our Global Head of Diversity, our Pride and Ally Network co-chairs Chuck Burke and Jackie Lacowsey, we'd like to welcome all of you to our 5th annual Out on Broadway Luncheon. We're thrilled to partner with Nadine Wong and Sandra Richards on presenting this event for you today, and especially thankful to the Drama League for all of the help that they gave us in putting this together. So Nadine's going to come up and give you a little bit more context on this event and how long Morgan Stanley's been doing it and how it started. But at first I thought I'd give you a little information about her. So Nadine Wong is a 25-year veteran of Morgan Stanley Private Wealth Management. Her recent accolades include being named to both the Forbes magazine and the Financial Times top advisor lists. And in addition to that, tonight, as a matter of fact, she is receiving the Outstanding Asian Americans in Business Award. So congratulations to Nadine. Nadine's commitment to bridge the arts and finance is reinforced by her roles as an advisory director to the American Theater Wing and also as a director of the Drama League. So with that, Nadine, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Nathan. Nathan has been instrumental in putting this wonderful lunch and forum together. I just want to give you a little background and thank you all for coming here today. About 5 years ago, Sandra Richards and myself were thinking of what we can do for LGBT Month and our network and our clients. And given my experience with the Broadway community, I thought, you know what better panel than to have people in our own neighborhood, in our own community, with the best geniuses, the best talent, to come here. So we're very privileged to have started with maybe a room half this size into a sold-out event. So thank you all for coming. I have the privilege of introducing my millennial group. They're all young and vibrant and talented. I'll just go ahead and tell you a little bit about them. Gideon Glick is a recently performed in Significant Other here at the Booth Theater on Broadway, and he was nominated for a Drama League Award. But what connects these three individuals together is Spring Awakening. So forget about the lazy dog days of summer. Today we're going to be vibrant, discussing their connections with Spring Awakening. He was also in Spider-Man. He played Jimmy Six. And in the Public Theater, Shakespeare in the Park, Into the Woods. But in 2008, you will see him in Ocean's 8, the new production with an all-female cast, including Sandra Bullock and Rihanna, to name a few. So we'll see it in, what, 2018, Gideon? Yep, summer. Terrific. Next, we have Jonathan Groff. American actor and singer, another young man from Philadelphia, and so today we have a trifecta. We have 3 people from Pennsylvania, we have 3 millennials, sorry Frank, and Jonathan rose to performance lead of Melancholy Gaber of original Broadway production of Spring Awakening, which he received a Tony Award nomination. And then also, most recently, he played King George III in Hamilton. So how many of you out there have seen Hamilton? Let's see, raise your hands. Okay, we need a little few more tickets, Jonathan. And you may also know him for the voice of Sven from the billion-dollar hit film Frozen. So, and he's also performed in Glee as Jesse St. James. And we have another Glee performer, Ali Stroker, who is here with us, a huge advocate, actress and singer, the first person in a wheelchair to graduate from Tisch School at NYU. Do we have any NYU people in the... Yes, excellent. And she also is focused on advocacy. She is co-chair of Women Who Care, that supports United Cerebral Palsy. And she is the founding member of Be Heroic, which is an anti-bullying campaign. So we appreciate all three of them here today, which will be moderated by my friend Frank Dilella for the 5th year in the row. Frank is a producer and reporter for New York One. He also has his intimate interviews over at Birdland. He's a professor at Fordham, where he is an alum and School of Journalism. And he produces, obviously, the on-stage reports, all for the theater. And you just recently saw him on the red carpet interviewing the stars and actors and actresses of the Tony Awards. So would you three please do us the honor and come on up the stage? Thank you.
Thank you.
You want me on the end? You were a millennial, right? Ish.
I don't know if we are millennials.
I think we're on the
Probably
cusp.
not.
Probably not, right?
The question is, are we millennials? Jonathan and I are the same age.
32, right? Are you 32?
33. So. I know. That 1 year. Oh my gosh. As Nadine said, I've been doing this now for 5 years, and I think when I heard who was going to join me today on the panel, I'm so excited because I'm friends with all these guys, and just so thrilled to be sitting up here talking about, you know, gay pride during Pride Month. So welcome all. First off, we just got off the 2016-2017 Broadway season. For those of you who don't know, the Tony Awards are kind of like the celebration of, or grand finale of the Broadway season. So I'm going to kick off the panel with, what were some of the highlights for you for the 2016-2017 Broadway season?
Good question.
Allie, we'll start with you. The boys are thinking over here.
What about this season? Well, watching the Tonys is always my favorite. I watch for the performances. I don't care who wins, or I do, but I'm really there to watch the performances. And I was in the revival of Spring Awakening, which performed in the Tonys last year. And this year I watched from my couch with takeout, and I was just reflecting with my boyfriend about, like, this industry is like such highs and lows. Like, 1 minute you're like, oh, star, and the next you're sitting on your couch eating Chinese food. Like, what's happening? But this year, I would say the highlights, well, I think Dear Evan Hansen was a huge highlight. Obviously, they won the Tony, but also the subject matter, talking about bullying, which is something that's really close to me, to my own heart. I started an anti-bullying campaign in Los Angeles called Be More Heroic, and so I think that the show is really important. It's an important piece of theater. Yeah. How
about you, Jonathan?
I'm not going to say this just because Gideon is sitting next to me, but Gideon's play Significant Other was definitely a highlight for me. Yeah. And he was robbed of a Tony, forget nomination, a Tony Award. Anyway, sorry.
How many of you saw Gideon Glick in Significant Other?
So good.
Certainly robbed. I think I've said that every single time I've talked about the Tonys.
Thank you. Sorry.
Your agent thanked me too.
I also loved, I'm seeing Miss Saigon tonight, so I'll let you know about that later.
All right.
But I loved Come From Away. I don't know, did anybody see Come From Away? That show made me cry. I also loved Bandstand, which didn't get a lot of love in, like, the Tony Award world, but I think Corey Cott is such a star, and I loved that show, and that show as well, like, made me cry.
Yeah. How about you, Gideon?
Well, I think doing Significant Other was very exciting for me. But in terms of things that I saw, I really loved The Great Comet. I thought that was very special and unique, and I also really liked the Glass Menagerie revival. Right? That kind of, that was kind of, people were kind of mixed about that, but I found it very moving.
One of the things I love about doing this panel is getting you guys to open up about, or getting the folks who join me up here, open up about their personal stories, their personal coming out stories, if you will. So I figured we'd start the panel with, you know, your coming out story. How'd you come out? And Allie, we'll start with you because you actually identify as bi.
Yeah, I identify as bisexual. When I was 23, I was cast on the Glee project, and not only was I cast on the show, but I also fell in love with a woman. And I had never really had a real relationship before, and I had always said to myself, I know there's someone out there for me. And it was weird that I hadn't specified, like, male or female, and I hadn't really given it a lot of thought, and then there I was, just feeling all of these amazing butterflies for this person that I never thought I would ever fall in love with. And so my coming out story really has to do with falling in love for the first time. And I remember telling my parents, and I told my mom in the driveway of our house, and she said, well, I'm not surprised. And I was shocked at her response. I was like, what? And she said, you know, Allie, you are the most open and accepting person I've ever known. And to her, that was how she viewed it. That I was in this relationship because I was open and accepting, and I was like, no, you have it wrong. I'm in this relationship because I'm in love with this person, and I'm now in a relationship with a man, and I've dated both men and women, and to be honest, I was really nervous about being on this panel. I feel very comfortable talking about disability all the time, but about talking about being bisexual, because sometimes I felt like that you're not choosing to be gay or straight, so that's where you fall. And I think that that's maybe just a stereotype, but I was nervous. I was nervous about that, and but it is honestly how I identify and how I feel. And at 30 years old, I'm really proud to say that that is how I identify.
Amazing. And we'll get to your other story in just a second.
Sure.
Jonathan.
Coming out story. Oh God. Okay. So I'm not bisexual. I'm what they call a platinum gay, meaning that a gold star gay is a gay that's never been with a woman, right? But then a platinum gay is one that was also born C-section, so I've never touched a vagina.
Oh, God. I never knew that.
Yeah.
I never knew that either. Wow.
And thank you. I don't know if that's not necessarily something to be proud of, but it's just a fact. I always knew that I was gay, and then I was doing Spring Awakening with Gideon. I get nervous even talking about it. It's so confronting to talk about sexuality to me still, even though I've had it been eaten out on cable. But Gideon remembers Cody, right?
Your roommate.
My roommate during Spring Awakening. Who was my first boyfriend when I was 19. I moved to New York, and from 19 to 23, he was my roommate, and he came to the opening of Spring Awakening and sort of behaved as my boyfriend, but we were completely closeted. All throughout Spring Awakening for the entire show, even though it was is a show about owning your sexual urges and expressing yourself and all of that. I was doing that on stage, but then I was very closeted in my real life. And then after I left Spring Awakening, I went to Italy by myself, and I was sitting in Florence journaling, and I'd kept a journal every day while we were doing Spring Awakening as an actor to write about what I'd done in the show that day, to be the show went great today, or it went bad, or I hit that note, or I didn't. But I'd never journaled about my personal life, and I was sitting in Italy, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I've never journaled about Cody. And then I was like, oh my God, I have to come out of the closet. I have to break up with Cody. I'm not in love with Cody anymore. And so then I came home to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where I'm from, which is why I'm nervous talking about my sexuality, and because I grew up there. And I came out to my brother, and then I came out to my parents, and then I came out to my friends, and my whole life changed, and it got so much better. I was also nervous as an actor to come out, being labeled as a gay actor. I thought I wouldn't have as much opportunities to act. But then I fell in love, and then came out publicly, and I was I'd rather be in love and with this person than be in a movie. I'd rather just do off-Broadway plays forever and be in love with this guy that I was with at the time. So now I'm out, and actually coming out in the end for me has been amazing. It's only made my life richer and better and more expressive and great.
Wow, Gideon.
So I was precocious. So I always knew I was gay at a very, very early age. I feel by second grade I was aware. And so me coming out was just a practicality. We didn't have showtime, and I wanted to watch Queer as Folk. And so I told my mom, when I was 12, I told my mom that I was gay, and thus I had to watch Queer as Folk. And so I was 12, yeah. I was 12 when I started coming out. My mom's a professor of communications at Penn, and her mentor is a guy named Larry Groff, who's a scholar of homosexuality in the media. So he was recording all of the shows on VHS at that point for his classes. So basically, we wouldn't get showtime, but he basically gave her all the tapes, and at first we would watch them together, and then I think we both decided that wasn't fun either. And then yeah, so then I got Queer as Folk, and I came out, and I was pretty fortunate. It was pretty easy.
And just asking a follow-up question here, did you ever fear, as an actor, someone who is, constantly on stage and also on screen, did you ever fear that would prevent you from getting jobs, or was that not even a question?
I never really thought about it. I think because I came out so early, it wasn't really, it wasn't a choice to hide interpersonally and then professionally, and maybe it has limited me. I don't really know, but I just don't, I choose not to care about it.
Mm-hmm. I read an interview that you did not too long ago, and you talked about telling stories of the gay community that aren't just about coming out. And looking at both of your careers, both on stage and on screen, you have done that. Can you talk about maybe some of the opportunities that have been there? Example, significant other, looking, where you are telling other stories as opposed to, 15, 20 years ago where coming out was such a big deal.
Yeah, I would say predominantly in the theater, I've played gay boys or men who the predicament is not about coming out or being at odds with their sexuality, and I think that's especially 10 years ago that was very rare. It's becoming more common now, and I feel very fortunate that those are the stories I'm being able to tell, because personally I never had problems with coming out, so it's actually not something I never really grappled with. It was more about being out and then dealing with just being a person.
Jonathan, looking, which we can dig more into in a bit, but just, that whole experience.
Yeah, that was one of what you're saying was one of the mission statements of the show, was to explore gay life, but not have it be torture. There was a lot of angst and torture in the show, but we didn't want to have any of it necessarily with people being tortured about the fact that they were gay. It was tortured in their relationships and their friendships and where they were at in their lives. I'm 40 and I don't like what I'm doing, or why am I 32 and I'm still single and my ex-boyfriend's getting engaged. It was all sort of universal life stuff as opposed to this sort of stereotypical gay sadness. There's a lot of gay sadness in it, but not like...
There's a lot of gay sadness.
Yeah, because there's a lot of gay sadness in life.
In general.
Just because there's a lot of life
But not
sadness.
this month, we're proud, right?
Yeah, this month we're real proud. This month, I actually, 2 years ago, they asked me to, I was one of the grand marshals of the New York City Gay Pride Parade, and when I came out to my mom, who was crying when I came out to her, was so upset, I was like, I'm gay, and this is sort of how I came out to everyone. I was like, I'm gay, I'm gay, but I'm not going to be in a parade or anything. And then 4 years later I had a rainbow sash. I was like,
Grand Marshal.
So
things have changed.
Evolution, yeah.
Things have changed.
Yeah.
All right, Ali, you made history a couple years ago when you took on Spring Awakening, the Deaf West's incredible production of Spring Awakening, as the first actress in a wheelchair to perform on Broadway, if I'm not mistaken, right? Mm-hmm. But getting to Broadway was quite a journey for you. I know your story, and I think it's an amazing story, but I'd love for you to share that story with our audience here today.
I was injured in a car accident when I was 2 with my mom and my brother, and we were driving down the street that we live on, and it was really a real accident. And I have a spinal cord injury, so I'm paralyzed from the chest down. If you know anything about the spinal cord, it's a C7, T2 incomplete injury. And I don't remember my life before I was injured. And I always think that that is sort of a gift, because there are people who get injured later in life and they compare what their life is now to what it was. And so this is just my normal, wheeling down the street, transferring, using my upper body as my legs. That is my normal. And when I was 6 years old, I was introduced to theater. And that's actually when I really remember my life beginning, because just being a little girl in a wheelchair did not feel good. There were a lot of people around me feeling sorry for me, and yeah, it was a really hard situation, but that didn't feel right. I didn't want people to pity me. And I also learned that I could sing, and for me that was like the ultimate freedom, because I wasn't experiencing running around and jumping and playing on the playground, but when I sang there were no limitations. And I was like, yes, this is it. This is what I want to do with my life. And I really believe that theater and the arts and singing has been my ultimate therapy. It's been my way of expressing who I am, my pain, my frustration, my joy. And so I saw a Broadway show when I was 10 years old, and I was like, I want to do that. But
what show?
Beauty and the Beast. Obviously. No. But as I went to see theater, I never saw anybody with a disability on stage. And representation is so important for young people, because you're clocking whether or not you count and you are included. And so when I moved to LA and started this journey with Spring Awakening, and then it came to New York and was going to Broadway, my agents called and they were like, you're going to be the first person in a wheelchair to ever be on Broadway. And I was like, we need to check the facts. I couldn't believe it. It was 2015. And that was a huge moment for me, which was like, this is really cool, but a moment where I decided that it was not a choice any longer. It was a necessity for me to become a full-out no-marking advocate, because my community was not being represented in the places where I wanted to be represented. And so that was kind of the beginning of like this speaking career that I have now, and being on Broadway was absolutely amazing. They made the backstage accessible, which was kind of a big deal, because wheelchair accessibility is like a thing, and not really a thing backstage in old New York theaters. So that was really exciting, and yeah, and I continue to go places and talk about that, because I think that education is the only way that we move forward.
The moment you made your opening night bow, or took to the stage at the Brooks Atkinson Theater, what was going through your mind?
I did it! I did it. I did it. Like, I have arrived at my dream. And what was so cool was there were a lot of young people with disabilities who came to see the show, because half the cast was deaf. So it was really like I was with my tribe. And there were a lot of young people that came to the stage door that had disabilities and said, you know, I never really thought this was possible for me, and my teachers told me that they didn't really think that I could be on Broadway, and now I know I can because of you. And I always get just a little bit turned off by like the inspirational thing, because my entire life I've been told you're an inspiration, and then it doesn't mean anything. But it was really cool to feel like this moment in my career is going to have an impact on this younger generation of young people who have disabilities, and that makes an accomplishment feel even more important.
You look at the landscape of Broadway currently, and one of the reasons why I've always been so attracted to the theater community here in New York is because it's all-inclusive. It celebrates diversity, you know, and more, especially this season and last season, we're seeing more and more folks who are different, but we embrace that, we celebrate that. Can you just talk about the landscape of Broadway currently, and, you know, Jonathan, looking at a show like Hamilton, where diversity is key, and that's what we celebrate when we go see that show, and that's kind of our story, the American story.
I think that's sort of like innately in the DNA of the arts and of theater is just to like embrace and celebrate people that are unique and different. It's why, because people that go into the arts are looking they're either expressing themselves because it's easy for them to express themselves, so they're naturally built for being an actor or a dancer or a singer, or because they have something inside that they have to express. And so I think that it's why the arts are so important. It's why like giving the arts to kids is so important, because it just sort of, I think of like in high school and awkward acting classes where you have to like stand in circles and like look at people and or like touch knees and do weird exercises that, or even doing a panel like this where like I get like shaky to sort of talk about my self and your personal journey, but in the end it's so healing and so like when somebody shares something real and true, which is what people hopefully are doing on stage, both the people that are sharing it and the people in the audience are lifted. It's like all boats rise when somebody sort of bears their soul and expresses themselves. And so I think that's why the arts are so inclusive and why they're so important, and so important to go see and or be a part of.
We've come a long way from where we were in terms of acceptance and getting things out there and having different people represented on both stage and screen. But as artists at the top of your craft, if you could wave a wand and say, poof, this also needs to happen, we need to make this change, what would those changes be?
You know, I feel like I've been somewhat frustrated lately in terms of when a straight male or a straight cisgendered male plays a gay male, or a female, you know, a straight female plays a gay female, it's described as transformative, or it's described as something that is like, wow, you really achieved that, or you were able to do that. And I feel like as a gay man who does play straight men, it's never talked about like that. And I find that to be kind of homophobic. To say, wow, you were able to, it's almost like people are being championed as if it was something so difficult. You surmounted that. You surmounted that challenge, which I find kind of offensive.
And I could piggyback on that there are many actors that win awards for playing disabled. And we're not putting people in blackface on TV or on stage. Why are we doing that with other minorities? And also, to answer your question, I feel like the content that's out there about disability, so much of the writing is only about the disability. And the truth of living with a disability is not every single moment of your day is about your disability. And the best way to represent disability is to just show it, instead of writing scenes where somebody says something awkward to somebody with a disability. So that's where I'm at with like the content, like the scripts that I'm sent and I read, I'm like, I can't do this. This isn't authentic representation of disability. This is someone else's idea, usually an able-bodied writer, writing about what they observe the experience to be. And that could be about any minority. But to me, I'm really interested and hoping that there's going to be more content where the representation is really authentic and honest.
Jonathan?
I guess the first thing that came to my head, if I could change one thing, is that it's so expensive to come to Broadway. It's like insane how elite it's become to see a Broadway show. Which just makes taking risks and casting the right actor as opposed to the most famous actor. There's all these like things that happen artistically on Broadway that are because, understandably, when people are bringing their family to see a show and it's $150 a ticket, it has to be amazing, and you have to want to stand up at the end because you're fucking paying so much money to see a show. And so there's this pressure to create the perfect show for the Broadway audience so they feel like they're getting their money's worth. Whereas if I could wave my wand and go poof, to quote you, I would just like turn back the dial of the money to like $20 a ticket to see a Broadway show or something, or $50 a ticket to see a Broadway show, because I like, especially at Hamilton, just like the sea of rich people, which is great that they're getting to see it, but to think about like all the kids, and they did do this, they have done this amazing like program with the youth, with the schools, to help kids come and see Hamilton. But primarily the 8 shows a week, it's like people that are paying an average of $800 a ticket. So it's like, oh my God, what about like the kid in Nebraska that's coming to New York? Wouldn't it be so great if he could get to see Hamilton? So I would do like a turn back on the money situation.
Whenever I talk to Lynn, I would always ask him over the years, or over the past year that Hamilton was winning all the awards, I would always say, what's been the coolest part of this whole experience? And he would always say, getting to perform for an audience full of kids from public schools who are coming to see the show and coming to Broadway for the first time and seeing their story and seeing people who look like them on stage. Did that go for you too?
It was so amazing. And he's like, when we were off Broadway and we would do like the student matinees, he would stand in the wings and weep. He would like cry because he's that like theater nerd, and he wrote the show. I think he wrote the whole show for those kids. Like in all the years of developing it, I think they were the people he thought of first while he was writing it. And so, yeah, it was amazing to do it for those kids. There was like so many different versions of those kids. There was like the cool kids that kind of like were shut down until the cabinet battles, and then they would like start screaming at the which was amazing. And then there was like the artsy kids that snapped. So it was such an interesting like array like of kids from the city that like some of them were super artsy and some of them weren't, but no matter what it was a really exciting group to be performing for.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What's been the most rewarding theatrical experience of your career thus far?
Definitely doing Spring Awakening on Broadway. For those of you who didn't see it, the whole show was in sign language and spoken and sung. After I did the Glee project, I kind of came up with this motto that like, your limitation can be your opportunity, because Glee did that for me. I realized that like being in a chair and being able to tell that story was an opportunity on Glee. And that's exactly what I think Spring Awakening did, and what Michael Arden did, our director, that he took a story like Spring Awakening and put kind of this other layer onto it of half the characters being deaf, and it turned into such an opportunity to tell the story of Spring Awakening in a different way. And that's the kind of work that I want to be doing, and that I got to do and make my Broadway debut doing.
Jonathan?
Spring Awakening was also my favorite theatrical experience because it was just the greatest. It was like every dream I'd ever had come true and more, because it's being 21. I think I was 20 or 21 when we were doing that. You were like 17, right?
I was 17.
17. It's so rare to find a show that takes young people seriously and challenges them and gives them material that isn't cute or, basic or like Grease or something. This was really dark, intense, complicated music and subject matter and lyrics, and it was very poetic, it was very expressive. And it taught me how to act. Getting the opportunity to do that show, 8 shows, 8 times a week for a year and a half, completely transformed my life. And the character that I played, Melchior, was a rebel and spoke his mind and didn't let the world define him. He was like a fighter, which I was not at all. I'm like such a people pleaser and like go with the flow and like don't rock the boat at all. And so I was playing this character, and I was also closeted, to bring it back to the gay theme. I was completely letting the world define me. I was not speaking my mind. I was smiling and nodding and avoiding hard questions. And playing the role of Melchior created this side so many times, because theater is kind of like, it's a religious experience, because it's like saying mantras over and over again, how like people that say the same things over and over again, like you wake up and say a prayer or whatever, or you read a passage from whatever, to like get into your DNA. Theater's the same way, doing it over and over and over again. It starts to like infect your body, just because you're doing the same thing and you're telling the same story every night. And so this like character of the rebel was getting into my DNA, and I think there's no mistake in that. 2 weeks after I left the show, I had this other person inside of me that I'd cultivated during doing the show that needed to express itself in my real life, and it's why I came out and was brave enough in my personal life to be able to do that, because I'd sort of cultivated those things with the character in that show.
Wow. Gideon.
I would say significant other. You know, I had an experience when I would leave the stage door. Well, first of all, I mean, the acting challenge itself was really very exciting. But
and let's just, for the audience, kind of fill them in on the. I think you guys know Spring Awakening. Let's just fill them in on.
So Significant Other was about this kind of late 20-something neurotic gay Jew living in New York who, essentially his best girlfriends, they all start to couple off, and it's how he kind of deals with that or doesn't deal with it. But it was the first time I read a play where I thought, oh my God, this is how I talk. This is how my friends talk. And I realized when I went out at the stage door, people would have tears in their eyes and go, thank you. That was the first time I saw myself up there. And that was very moving to me. And I realized also, you know, when I came out, it was to watch Queer as Folk. But my mom's mentor, who provided Queer as Folk, he provided all these things for me. He provided, you know, the Trevor movie, Love, Valor, Compassion, like Billy's Hollywood Screen Kit, I think that's what it's called. But he gave me all these modes of representation and visibility. And I realized with Significant Other, I went, wow, I'm a part of that. Mm-hmm. I'm giving people what Larry gave me. Mm-hmm. And that was really, really moving.
You also, I was reading up on you yesterday in terms of Significant Other and the work you did in the show, and you talked a few times about how it was a cathartic experience doing that show. Why was that?
Well, I mean, emotionally, the character ran a gamut, and it's a nice part. I didn't leave the stage, so you started at one place, and you ended at a drastically different place, and it was cathartic because I got to get everything out. You could cry, you could scream, you could laugh, you could dance, you could sing. It just felt like a good exorcist of all that.
You're all leaders in terms of the community, young leaders, you know, for the body of work that you all represent. But who do you look up to in the community? Who are people that you say, you know, that's a role model, or I'll follow her, I'll follow him to the ends of the earth?
I'd say Dennis O'Hare. I got to work with Dennis. First of all, he's an incredible person. He's also an incredible artist, and he writes. He's very politically active. He has a child. He has a good, committed relationship that's very loving and supportive, and that's something I look for and I admire.
Jonathan?
I just saw this documentary about Armistead Maupin, who wrote the Tales of the City series, and I got to know him a little bit when I was living in San Francisco, and watching the way that he's lived his life since the late 70s. He came out when he was 30 in San Francisco in the late 70s and wrote about his experiences and created the character of Anna Madrigal, who was like the first major like trans figure in literature, and just he outed Rock Hudson when like Rock Hudson was getting sick, and I learned through this documentary has been what's the guy's name who's in Lord of the Rings?
Which one?
Which one?
So many.
Ian McKellen.
Right.
Ian McKellen came out in 1988. Isn't that crazy to think about?
Yeah.
Because Armistead told him to do so. Anyway, I just saw this documentary and was so inspired by someone that lives their life and has lived their life when it was even way harder. And I'm sure Dennis O'Hare is like the same way. Like people that are older than us, that when, for us to be like out as bisexual or as gay is, you know, can be awkward and challenging, but to think about the generation that came before us and those people that were out and expressive is just like kind of mind-blowing to me, because I'm not sure if I grew up a generation ago if I would have the balls to be so outspoken.
LA.
I became very close with Cameron Manheim when we did Spring Awakening, and she's become a mentor of mine. And what I really see that she represents is that it's so important to do really good work, and it's equally important to help people. That as an artist, we get that opportunity, and that can be always incorporated into your work, is helping other people. So that really has not changed my life, because it's something that I've always wanted to do, but it has given me more focus on the kinds of things that I want to be doing.
Wow. Jonathan, you were in Larry Kramer's The Normal Heart. For those of you, I'm not sure if you saw that incredible revival that was done on Broadway in 2011. It was then captured on film by HBO, starring Mark Ruffalo and Matt Bomer, an incredible cast of actors. But you got to be a part of that film. Were Larry being, you know, a leader in the LGBTQ community, was there any interaction with him during that film?
Oh my God, the first thing that I think of is that he didn't want to be around for a lot of it because it was so intense for him to sort of see people in period costumes, like it's sort of capturing his life on camera. So he wasn't around, and Ryan Murphy, who directed it, was like leading the ship. And then he thought, like, you know when I'm going to come is in the beginning when they're at Fire Island. It's like before, I was the first one to hit the sand. I was the first one that died. I don't know why I'm laughing about that. Because when you're doing something so dramatic, we did laugh a lot while we were shooting it, because you either like go into a deep spiral of depression, or you're like, you have to just laugh because you're like dying of AIDS, but you're fake dying of AIDS. Anyway, so we were on like the beach at Fire Island, and it was the white party where everybody like dressed up in white. And so Larry was like, oh great, that's the one I'll come to, because it's like a celebration, there's nothing sad, there's no, you know, because basically the whole movie is sad of people like dying. And he came to the beach, and I have this like vivid memory of him like walking over like the sand dune and like standing there and just like his eyes filling up with tears and being like, sorry, I have to go, and turning around. Oh my God, now I'm like crying and laughing at him, because he was like, all those guys, it was such a vivid memory for him to see it like recreated in that way and know that like all those people had died. So that was like an intense moment of having him on set.
Wow.
That was like the only moment that he was there, which we thought was going to be like this great party. And then he was like, all these people died, and then he like left.
Yeah.
Wow. Did you talk to him, you know, at the premiere? I mean, was there any interaction with him?
Yeah, every time I've met him a couple of times, and I'm always like, why would he have any idea who I am? And I don't think he ever does every time I talk to him, because I just sort of come up to him as a fan, and I'm like, hi, I was the first one that died of AIDS in the movie of, and he's like, right, cool. So it's just like an honor to breathe the same air as him, you know, and just to like be in existence with him, and he's an icon.
Yeah, totally. On a lighter note, we were just having lunch a couple minutes ago, and Jonathan told me he's never been to P-Town, but just went there a couple weeks ago or last weekend.
Yes.
And why don't you share with the audience that experience?
This orgy that I had was so... No, I'm kidding. Has anyone been to P-Town? Some people have. You've never been?
I've never been.
We should go.
I'd love to.
It was great. It was like... it was sort of like a gay pride parade, sort of, because the like main drag in P-Town is so small, and so it was very friendly. It was very friendly.
Just walking up there with your.
Oh yeah, I went with the people from Looking. So this guy who played Dom, with the guy with the mustache, and the guy Richie who played Raul who played Richie, who was my boyfriend on the show, and his girlfriend. We all like went up together, and it was like we were like a walking poster for our show. It was hilarious. It was so fun. It's so beautiful up there. Gotta go.
The story was better at lunch. All right. All right, Jonathan. Moving on now. June is Pride Month. How are you all gonna celebrate Pride this year?
I don't know. I plan to go down to the parade. I just moved back to Chelsea from New Jersey this past year, and I was at the parade last year, and plan to go again this year. I think it's feels like such a celebration. We're in such a different time now in our world, so I'm curious to see what the tone of it will be. I think it will be very different this year. But that is my only plan so far. I'm not sure if I'll end up at a party or something. But.
Jonathan?
My friend planned her baby shower on Pride, so I'll be starting with a baby shower, and then, I don't know, I feel like with Pride you kind of always stumble into something by the end of the day. But I'd never been to a Pride until I was the Grand Marshal of the parade a couple of years ago. And I never really understood the purpose of the Pride parade until I went. I always was kind of like, what's the point? Why would I go? And then going there, it's so celebratory, obviously, and so emotional, and it feels so important. It felt so important to me when I was there, of like people having the ability to express themselves and be who they are, and it's so political and empowering and vital, and so I've been to a Pride event every year since then, because it feels so necessary once you go, at least for me.
Gideon?
I'll be packing. My boyfriend and I are moving in together at the end of the month, and he lives in Philadelphia, so I'm going back and forth helping him pack because I can't trust him to do that. And I'll be packing my apartment up, and then we're moving. So unfortunately, I'll be missing Pride. At least the parade. But this is like celebrating Pride.
Yeah, totally.
It is. It is. I do want to open the room up to questions for our fabulous folks up here. So who wants to kick it off? And we're asking for questions, not necessarily statements, please. Who would like to kick it off?
Anything. We'll answer anything.
Right here, yeah. Uh-oh.
So, like, currently in our society, I'm trying to think how to frame this without it having an implied statement. There's, a lot more backlash against identities, like with the capital I identity, right? With the idea that that's divisive and things. But theater and performance is very much about presenting identities, right? Who this person is. So how do you think there's an opportunity, given how things are potentially changing now, for theater to have a role in hopefully either stemming the tide there or bringing it back? Can you repeat that question for the people in the back, because I didn't hear, but now I have the mic, so we're good. I meant them, but you can if you want.
You want to take that?
So basically, well, why don't you just ask? We'll I don't want to put words in our mouth.
Basically, there's a lot of backlash right now against sort of identity politics, what people call that. So people really being able to present themselves holistically and talk about things that perhaps some people feel would be divisive because it talks about how we're different. And there's quite a bit of backlash now. But theater and performance is about being able to present people, hopefully holistically, and identities. So how do you think theater has a role in potentially helping to stem the tide of some of the potentially backward motion we may be going into now?
Well, in terms of backward motion, what do you mean?
I mean, yeah, it was statement time. just, I guess, in terms of the political landscape and things, so, the public theater getting in trouble for things, or, pushback against trans rights, or people saying that talking about race or orientation or even ethnic background or anything is divisive because we should just all be American or all be, and so then claiming your identity is in some way trying to separate as opposed to be yourself. So, but I think theater is about, right, presenting humanity in different ways and things, so how can theater help as a tool?
Well, one of my favorite parts about theater is that it's live. And so for an audience to be sitting in a theater with other real people in front of them telling stories, I think has a different kind of impact than listening to something, say, be reported or watching a screen. And I hope that theater humanizes us a little bit more, because I think because of our screen world that we live in, that it's really that it's so easy to separate ourselves now and to not have to look somebody in the eye. And so I think theater has power because of the way it's presented.
And also presenting it in an authentic way, like you were talking about the writers knowing exactly your experience or being the people who've gone through your experience. Or first thing when you were asking your question was, the first thing that came to mind for me was Transparent, the Amazon series. Jill Soloway's brilliant series where she, I talk to Judith Light all the time, and she talks about what set is like and how, what is depicted on screen is very much depicted on set, and trans rights and so on. So that's my 2 cents, guys.
I think too, like, the cool thing about New York and getting to work here in the theater is that the people that create work here, the producers and the writers, are so in tune with politically what's happening in the world, and they're so brave, and they want to create work that moves us forward, not pushes us back. And the awesome thing about New York is, even just thinking about this season, like a show like Dear Evan Hansen, or a show like Come From Away, or even a play like Oslo, the idea of them being created by these brilliant minds in New York who are absolutely listening and aware of and in tune with the political climate and putting it right into their work and expressing themselves through their work, creating a beautiful piece of theater, and then having that travel the country and go on a tour and spread those messages and those sort of, they become like a beacon of light for understanding and communication, not just in New York. It gets created here because a lot of great minds are here. But then when it does well, which a lot of amazing shows this season that have a lot to say politically have done well, then they get to go all over the world and definitely all over our country and sort of help to express feelings and emotions and views of what's happening now.
Next question.
I know this doesn't apply to all of you, but can you talk a little bit about what it's like to work with Ryan Murphy? And when you talked about screen versus and humanizing, I think Glee, for me specifically, really humanized the differences that we all have, and I think he did a really good job portraying that through each character. I guess I'll leave it a little open-ended to kind of talk about how that impacted you guys working with him.
Well, I had a really cool experience. I worked with Ryan on the Glee Project, which was a reality TV show where you competed for a role on Glee, and then I was on Glee. And when I was doing the Glee Project, something that I was so blown away by is Ryan was really intimidating at first, and then when you're in a room with him and we were talking, he has an unbelievable read on people. He really sees past your yeah, your facade and the presentation. And I really appreciated that. And I was so, at the time, I hadn't really had a lot of conversations with people about how I wanted to be represented as far as my disability. And I remember him saying, like, well, I really would like for you to play a bitch. And it was so refreshing for me to hear, because he was like, I don't think that this character, I don't think it needs to be all around the disability. It was really what I wanted to hear from someone who was creating this role. And so Ryan is incredibly powerful, and I think that Glee was just one of those opportunities and one of those creations that really tapped into the heart of young people and trying to express themselves for who they really are, and they really wanted to be seen, and he really got that. That's I think something that that's what he stands for in many ways because of the work that he creates.
Yeah, I can't imagine what it would be like growing up as like a middle schooler and watching Glee.
Yeah.
Where like I was watching Saved by the Bell, which I loved and still love, obviously.
Yeah.
But on Glee, the way that Ryan, it's like it was almost hilarious how many issues he managed to like put into that show. And starting with Chris Colfer's character and watching his whole like coming out with his dad and like he has a genius mind, and he's so scary when you first meet him because he's got this like really intense demeanor, but he's actually this like sweet, tender, emotional, loving, nurturing. He's one of the most loyal people I've ever met in the world. I mean, he hires the same people over and over and over again. He's just such an incredible person, and yeah, in that show, I still feel like that show, and I was like in it, but I like wasn't like, we're sort of the same. We're like, we were in it, but we weren't like in it the whole time like some of those kids were. And I think that they like changed the world in ways that we'll still be seeing as those kids that watch that show get older. In the way that like I've met so many young professionals that say they slept on the street at Spring Awakening, and I'm like, what? And now I'm like working for you, or you're, so many people that were changed by these amazing sort of like progressive shows. And I think Glee has such a wide reach, and we're only seeing the like beginning of the ripple effect.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Stephanie. My question is for Jonathan, but I think applies to everybody across the board. So Patrick had no shortage of awkward moments coming into himself and his life. And what kind of advice do you have for somebody who maybe is also like coming into themselves and trying to figure out who they are and how to just be the person that they are, whoever that may be, awkward and all?
Great question. In playing Patrick, I felt like I was all the awkward, inappropriate, word vomiting, et cetera, was who I am, like, but I can usually like hide it with a calm exterior. And I guess if I could, I mean, advice is so crazy because it's so subjective, and obviously take everything that everyone always says with a grain of salt. But finding journaling really helps. Like sometimes I'll like type out things on my computer just to like work out thoughts by myself, so that I'm not vulnerably working through shit in front of people that might judge me or make me feel weird. So typing alone helps me a lot. And surrounding yourself with people that you trust that will love you for all of your awkward moments and weirdness. Just like creating a safe like nest where you can work through your shit and then hopefully be yourself in moments that you aren't surrounded by that safe nest, but having like a group of people that really care about you and love you for who you are, which I think Patrick did have on that show. He had friends that were really there for him, which I think saved him in so many ways. And like just finding ways to express yourself and being forgiving of yourself as well, and not taking anything too seriously ever.
I'll speak about my own experience. I spent a lot of time and years just being so afraid of being seen. Like out in public, like going into a bar felt like I was being stung by bees. I was just so uncomfortable. And I think it takes practice. So if you know that there is a certain kind of experience or place that you do feel uncomfortable, push yourself to have those experiences. Surround yourself with the people you love that make you feel confident, and then go and do them. Put yourself out there. I remember there was like a period of time that I was just constantly going out with my girlfriends just so that I wanted to see if I could move through this feeling of being seen by my peers in a setting that felt the most vulnerable to me. But practice. Practice.
So good.
Gideon?
I mean, those are very good advice. You know, I always say, like, I mean, I think what John said, especially about having a group, I tend to, sometimes I tend to say everything that's on my mind, and so if I'm working things out, I'll be like calling everybody and saying the same thing over and over again. And it's finding people who are patient with you and who love you for that, and then also you can love too, because they're going to do the same thing for you, and just kind of loving the neuroses and loving what makes you unique or special, and kind of appreciating that rather than wanting to change that. I think that's the most beneficial thing I think I found.
Next question. You guys are so quiet. Yeah, sir. Wait, microphone. There we go.
Thank you. Do you think, I was curious about coming out or being out today, if you think it's had an impact on the arc of your career or the opportunities or your audiences?
Definitely. I mean, in film and television, I've played some straight characters, but in theater, I've predominantly played gay characters. In Spring Awakening, I played a young gay male, and I think that's what introduced me to the theater community. I also I've been pretty outspoken about it. And it's also something I'm passionate about. When I see a gay character in a script, I get more excited about it because I feel I have something to bring to it. And so I think that definitely informs the arc of my career, 100%.
Yes, I agree. Me too. I had the fear of coming out, thinking like, will I not be able to play opposite a girl if I come out as gay? Because then everyone sees you as a gay man and suddenly playing a romance, even though it's so weird. Because to like play gay to me means either you're like playing a stereotype of like a super butch lesbian or like a flaming gay guy like Jack from Will and Grace or something, is to play gay. Whereas like the guy that played my boyfriend on Looking is straight. We played intimacy. We didn't play sexuality stereotype. So it's so funny to me that it's still a thing. I understand why it's still a thing, and I look forward to the day when like people can get past that. Although I don't think that they're quite past it yet, but I think it's moving in the right direction. But when I came out, I was like, well, I was in love with this guy, so I was like, I really love this real life love thing. So I'm good to just like be gay, doing off-Broadway plays forever. Like I don't care to like do a movie or something because this real life love is so great. And then it ended up, I also think selfishly, I liked the attention of being in the closet because you got attention from men and women. And so you weren't saying, you know, if it was one or the other. But then what was so weird was when I came out, all these girls were like, but you'd go straight for me. So it was like a weird reversal of attention. But then when Looking happened, this show that I did on HBO where I played a gay character and it was about being gay, it was different because I thought, okay, well now it's more than just like being out publicly. Now I'm gonna like get fucked up the ass against a tree on TV. So that's more than just like I'm a gay man. It's like, and now watch me having like gay sex. You know, it's a little more of like pulling the curtain back. It's like the ultimate version of pulling the curtain back. So then I thought, is this a bad choice? Because now I'm like really putting it in, really putting it out there in so many ways. But like it's been the case like so far for me where if something feels scary, like you said, like when you feel uncomfortable or like something might be a little weird, kind of like lay into it, like put it into a different gear and just like ride into that feeling, because some people will destroy their lives to avoid feeling uncomfortable. And Looking was a show that made me feel uncomfortable, but I also felt really passionate about it. And it's my favorite thing on camera that I've ever worked on, and it ended up allowing me to express myself and do work that I feel like I had a total breakthrough doing that show. And owning my sexuality has just been like, so freeing at the end of the day. And it's freeing as an actor too, because then you're in rehearsal, like when you're out and you're in rehearsal and you come in and you tell stories about like the person you fucked last night, it's like, you end up like bonding with the people around you, and that's what rehearsal processes are about, like expressing your, not necessarily telling your sex story, but at work.
Was that like significant other?
Maybe it's different at Morgan Stanley, but when you're creating something with a group of people, maybe it's not different. When you're open and you're sharing and you're your most authentic self, other people feel encouraged to be that way as well. You move past a lot of bullshit, and you can all come together and like be honest, and you work better together. When you're not in a rehearsal process or in an office, maybe sort of like part of your brain is working and the other part of the brain is trying to hide something or compartmentalize something. If you can just like fully be yourself in the room, just like work gets done so much better, and like, you know, it just makes everything go smoother in my experience.
Allie, final word?
Oh gosh, pressure. So this sort of ties in with representation too, but I really didn't see sexuality and disability in the same conversation growing up ever. It always felt like people didn't see me as someone who was sexual. And that really affected how I felt about myself. And so when Danny and I started to date and we came out, and it was just around the Glee project, I felt like this new feeling of I don't want to use the word confidence, but like knowingness that I was capable of anything in my life. That like being capable of things is like a theme when you have a disability, because there's like, you have a limitation. But this experience for me, and coming and opening up and coming out about it, changed how I felt about what was possible for me in my life. And that was reflected in my career. So it doesn't necessarily, like, I haven't played, I don't think I've ever played a gay woman in a show, but for me, like, and what John was saying about, like, you know, like being able to really be yourself, I all of a sudden felt like there was a place for me. And also coming out when I was with Danny, and because it was around the Glee project, there were all these young girls who were like, oh my gosh, like, you know, like I feel like I can relate to you. Like, I always have seen like a woman who is gay looking a certain way, and like I feel like I look more like you, and it feels so good to know that that exists, and that I can be, it was specifically like I can be very feminine and be gay. And so coming out in this industry has not only, I think, an effect on your work, but on the people that you are sharing your work with.
Ladies and gentlemen, Alton Broadway Panel 2017.
Before I thank my fabulous 4 millennials, I do want to thank the people who helped organize this event and help bring us all together. That includes Henry Espinosa, Nathan Stein, Tracy Perlongo, Marina Smith, Adriana Nunez, my co-partner Sandra Richards, and from the Drama League we have Margaret Breed, Jennifer Sunshine. And let me tell you, this panel, I want to truly, from the bottom of Morgan Stanley's heart, thank you for your authenticity, for your honesty. I think we have all of you are game changers in the industry, and we're fortunate enough to have you here on the panel. And you are all champions in our eyes. And I wish you all happy Pride, everyone. Thank you. Yeah.